Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Welcome to the All Things Policy podcast by the Takshashila Institution. I'm Dr. Nithiyanandam. I'm going to discuss today on an interesting topic. In this special episode, we'll delve into Post-Sindoor, India's path to defense innovation, with a senior defense expert who has contributed a lot for bringing up India's indigenous defense ecosystem. Operation Sindoor has reignited crucial conversations about India's military capabilities and the pressing need for indigenous innovation. In this podcast, we are planning to explore the hard questions. What holds back Indians' defense startups? How do we bridge the gap between R&D and the real-world deployment? How can India truly balance self-reliance with the strategic imperatives of global technology partnerships? And many more. Join us as we chart the future of India's defense innovation ecosystem and imagine what success might look like 15 years from now. Commodore Golaya, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure being here.
Yeah. I would like to start with the question. Operation Sindoor has sparked considerable public interest and debate with strategic circles. How do you interpret its broader implications for India's defense posture, sir?
Before coming to the implications for the Indian defense ecosystem, so let's see the implications of Op Sindoor itself, sir, which
Right.
I think many would agree has redefined the new normal. First of all, what Operation Sindoor has done before this, also we've had we retaliated after terrorist strikes, whether it be the surgical strike or the Balakot. But in this case, there were many things which were different. One
Right.
is, and across the board, not only in the defense field, even if you see on the diplomatic front, the cancelling of the Indus Water Treaty.
Right.
The level it's been taken to the next level. We've upped
Mm.
the ante, so to speak. And this time, the punitive strikes were not restricted only to, the fact that we went and hit in Bahawalpur or Muridke, for example. So
Yeah.
that sets a new normal. And it tells Pakistan that terrorism will not be tolerated and they would be cost to pay. So that is the first thing. Now, coming specifically to what it means for the Indian defense manufacturing ecosystem, I think this, again, we are at an inflection point because our indigenous weapon systems have given a good account for themselves. People have realized how potent our homegrown technology has been. Going forward, I see it as, as I said, an inflection point where more and more our reliance on our domestic and homegrown systems, whether it be the large systems or the small innovations which are being done, especially by the startups. I see this as a big plus for them.
Right. Since you have said this is a different opportunity for Indian defense ecosystem, I'm sure this has not started overnight, right? It would have planned and there's a thought process behind it. So according to you, when was the first step taken and from when we started looking at our own indigenous systems to incorporate in our services?
So very correct. It doesn't happen overnight. So if we see, let's take, because you have to have a benchmark. Let's start with the Indian defense exports. Because exports, of course, is
Right.
not really indicative of how much we have inducted ourselves. But the fact that exports are growing also is indicative of our the defense ecosystem itself growing, right?
Right.
So, if we see the last 10 years, there has been a sustained push. So, I think our defense exports, even in the last 3 years, if you see, it has virtually grown manyfold. So, there has been sustained push, whether you talk about the Atmanirbhar Bharat or you talk about the Make in India. And both of these are distinct and yet related. So let me speak from the perspective, because as you're aware, I was a part of the NIIO, or the Naval
Right.
Innovation and Indigenization Organization.
Right.
So in this, there are two eyes: the innovation and the indigenization.
Correct.
If you see the Make in India, and both of them are important. It's not that which is more important than the other. Both of them are important. So one aspect is getting the manufacturing to India, whether it be for the defense industry or it be across the board, other things also. Because when the entire ecosystem goes up, if we get into chip manufacturing, for example, it will have obviously an effect on the defense ecosystem as well. So one is the indigenization, which is technology which is already available somewhere in the world, and we bring it to India and we start manufacturing in India. And the
Yeah.
second part is the innovation. That is, the homegrown R&D and the new things which we are making in India. And I've been saying this for a long time, especially when it comes to emerging technology, like AI, drones, anti-counter drones, quantum. This is a thing where everybody is at the same start line, so to speak, because the whole world, it's a new field for everybody. So we do not have the disadvantage which we had, for example, in the industrial age systems. So, having said that, I think both of them are progressing well. The indigenization as well as innovation, and when the two of them come together, I think it gives a big opportunity to us. Both are big firms as well as the startups.
Yeah, that's true, and we have seen the evidence of those initiatives which has yielded us in a critical moment. Now, but then from a technical standpoint, right? What does Operation Sindoor reveals about our current capabilities? It's not just about our positive capabilities. Are there limitations, and particularly concerning indigenous defense system? Do we have limitations yet?
So, if you're talking about the capabilities, the biggest takeaway for me from Operation Sindoor, I think, would be the strikes on the airfield, so to speak. The fact that we could simultaneously take on and get through the air defenses and have targeted strikes. We had it in other places also, including the terror infrastructure. But the fact that after they retaliated, and then we hit back, and we hit back hard, and the
Yeah,
fact that we could take out the air defense, we could take out the airfields, I think was the biggest plus.
yeah.
And that why I'm saying it's the biggest plus is because if you see the larger picture, now Pakistan, I think, has more or less deployed all that they had.
Yeah, and they were expecting us to hit. Yeah, they are aware that we are going to retaliate and retaliate strong.
In the sense that they played the trump card. They don't have anything more than this. If
Yeah.
you see from our perspective, on the other hand, we have not even used, say, 1 or 2% of our capability. The Navy did not come into play at all, other than the very
Right.
aggressive posturing. But Navy did not fire missiles in anger. So, with a very few missiles and with aircraft operating at standoff ranges without crossing over the IB or the LOC, and the ground-based missile systems taking them on, with that we virtually annihilated their infrastructure. So now there are two, three takeaways. Now, because you must have read the articles in the news that Pakistan is going for the next generation fighters from China. And I've been saying this: what we have shown is that you may have the best fighters, but if they can't get airborne, what use is it? And we have shown and demonstrated a capability to make sure in the CAS, as you call it, so the counter air operations which are there, in that we have shown that we have the ability to make sure that they cannot bring their air force into play at all. So that's one. And quite a bit of it, when we're talking about, let's talk about the drones. So they had those Turkish drones and the Chinese drones, swarms of them came. initially, I think they were trying to test our air defense. So in that, even without going into systems which are the S-400 or this thing which are
Right.
expensive, we took them on even with the indigenous innovations, that is the modifications which were done to the legacy guns to make them more suitable for the current role, as well as the indigenously developed counter drone systems, whether
Right.
it be from the DPSUs or from the private sector. And the entire layered defense which we had against drones, it's been phenomenal. So
Right.
everybody talks about the Iron Dome of Israel.
Right.
Uh, it was really heartwarming. In fact, you must have also seen the videos.
Yeah.
Normally, if you have missiles and drones, and if there's a warlike situation and there's munition coming at you, most people would run and hide. But here
Yeah.
you could see the
And
general
people taking
population on
videos.
the rooftop taking the video, confident that those things would be taken out. So that
Yeah.
confidence in our systems is, I think, a big plus, and that confidence was justified because they have been able to, hit virtually nothing over here. So
Mm.
we have been able to hit the targets. They're supposedly well protected targets, going through their much hyped AD systems, and we've been able to hit with pinpoint accuracy and hit at will. Whichever target
Right.
we selected, we hit it. And there's enough evidence of that now. This time, nobody can say that where is the sabut, because with satellite imagery and everything, it has been conclusively shown that we have hit the targets, we've hit where we wanted, and we've hit it with precision, including the hangars where the high value assets were stored. The hangar itself has been taken off, and the images show that. On the other hand, they have not been able to hit us at all, which obviously that is just one statement, but that statement is possible obviously because of the multi-layered and at various levels the systems which were there. As I said, both from the DPSUs, both and the the startups, as well as I would say some of the systems which we have imported.
Right.
So it was a mix of everything, and it's worked well. Now,
Yeah.
your question specifically was about the Indian defense ecosystem and specifically the limitations.
Right.
Now, I would say that when it comes to some of the bigger systems, whether it is S-400 or fighters, for example, to a very large extent, they are still not homegrown in the sense that they were imported. But having said that, I think the systems which we jointly developed with
Right.
other countries, whether it be Israel or it be Russia, whether
Mm.
it is the surface to surface missiles or air to surface missiles like BrahMos, or indeed the surface to air missiles, they have given a good account of themselves. It's a mixed bag, I would say. We have shown the capability, we have shown the advantages of collaborative approach with other countries, the friendly countries, and at the same time, we have also seen that we have a long way to go when it comes to being fully Atmanirbhar.
Right.
All 3 points would be there.
Yeah, and that's true because many people also think if a system has a navigation system for accompanied to it, if a missile has a navigation system to it, it can precisely target anywhere in the world. But that's not true. There are many components, as you said, which are associated to it, and that makes it more precise in targeting. So, moving away from this, there is a term called Death Valley, right? It's frequently used to describe the gap between research and deployment. So, what institutional or policy level barriers, in your experience, hinder the scaling and adoption of indigenous innovations? Because it was not an easy job when you took up a responsibility to be part of NIIO. You would have faced similar challenges. And what were the barriers? Can you share some?
So if you're talking about the institutional barriers, I would say there are no institutional barriers, but yes, there are procedures, and some cases procedures are more cumbersome and more, they're very long drawn. The defense procurement, not only in India, the world over, and people are realizing this. Even if you see, there are quite a few articles in the US context which say that procurement and not innovation is the problem. And the procurement procedures being long drawn, and given the fast pace of change of technology, what happens is that if you take 7 or 8 years to induct a system, by that
Right.
time the technology changes. So it is a problem. Now, as you just mentioned, there have been some very progressive institutional reforms. If you see the amendments to the DAP, for example, which have happened in the last 2 3 years, they have been
Right.
very very enabling. Whether you talk about the fast track procurement or there've been a number of changes. But having said that, if I had to pinpoint places where change is still needed, or where we need to accelerate more, I would say that the chapter on innovation in the DAP, which is the Defense Acquisition Procedures, whether it is about the IDEX cases or the TDF cases, the Technology Development Fund, they have been substantially reworked. In fact, if you see, almost the entire thing has been rewritten. The amendments have replaced each and every line. And they have made not only the development but also the procurement very, very easy. I think the same level of acceleration has not happened in case of the bigger cases.
Okay.
If you're talking about, say, the artillery guns also, which is something which the ATAGs, there've been various articles in the media saying that the things which we have developed indigenously and the things which have even started getting exported have unfortunately not got inducted in the Indian Armed Forces to date. Sadly, that is, in a few cases, it is true. So I would say that the procedures have been changed. It's been a huge difference. However, when it comes to the bigger cases of procurement, and
Right.
especially when it comes to what is called, the make one, make two, make three, there I think our success rate has been slightly lower than what it has been for the startups and the smaller firms. So that, I think, should be a focus area, and that is something which we could target. The second point, if I can highlight it here, is this thing about emergency procurement. Now,
Correct.
I don't like term emergency. Some not generally you call it emergency procurement, but this is a procurement where, let's call it fast track procurement, where
Right.
up to the delegated financial powers, the services are authorized to procure what they need to meet
Right.
the immediate requirements. So I would say that instead of seeing it as an emergency measure and always being in an emergency mode, if that is a system which has been proven to be effective, that is a system which meets the services requirement, so should we not make it the new normal? Which means that a separate chapter, maybe in the DAP or the DAP whenever it is reviewed, which gives the up to the delegated financial powers, which of course would be at various levels, but up to the delegated financial powers, the local commander, right up to the service, the vice chiefs, should be able to procure, and should be able to procure without any external this thing, following what is called the emergency
Correct.
procurement or the fast track procurement procedures. That, I think, should become the new norm, because eventually, for the defense ecosystem to come up, you have to have the procurement happening. So once procurement happens, the rest of the things fall into place. Then the venture capitalists will come in. The money will flow. The R&D would happen. R&D would be funded. So the bottom line, I think, for any industry, not only the defense industry, is procurement. So that is, I think, something which we need to target.
Yeah, I'm sure one of our listener will take it forward to the relevant stakeholder. And just moving ahead from this, Comrade Golaya, there are a lot of examples where Indian firm worked with a foreign company to develop a critical technology, right? Could you share a concrete example of an Indian defense innovation leaping from lab to field completely indigenously, and what factors enable that transition? Like any company which indigenously worked on a complete different technology where others are not working, and it has translated into further levels.
Oh, far too many to mention, sir. So, as I said, you asked for one concrete example. I can give you many, but I think that will be unfair, because whichever firm I name, the
Right.
others will feel left out. But
You can name the technology at least. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's take the Sprint initiative of the Navy, which was, as you're aware, as a part of Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, the Navy had stated that they want to develop at least 75 indigenous technologies. And now
Correct.
all of them were not, cutting edge global first. Some of them were very simple innovations, but which met a felt need of the users. However, having said that, I think there were at least a dozen global firsts there. And I use the word global first with caution because obviously anything for which you apply for a patent and you get a patent is a global first by definition. I mean, in most
Right.
cases. But having said that, there have been things. Whether you talk about nanotechnology, there were those that fabric which was made by one firm, or if you talk about the drones and anti-drones, there have been quite a few path-breaking innovations there. When it comes to AI, there have been quite a so we've had in communication, we've had especially underwater communication, we've had some successes. So there've been a number of the cases. I would not say one. I would say there've been many.
Right. So, where are we in terms of defense innovation ecosystem compared to other nations like Israel, for example, which are known for their agile and dynamic R&D frameworks? So, we have started. Where are we in the global frameworks?
Israel might be a difficult country to compare with or compare ourselves to for many reasons. One, of course, because of the sheer size.
Right.
Having said that, Israel as a nation has always been very, very innovative. You
Right.
might have read that book, Innovation Nation. But they have, not only in defense, but in other fields as well. They
Right.
have shown their innovative streak, and they're known for that. But when it comes to specifically to defense innovation, uh,
Right.
there again, Israel has, as compared to not only India but to various other countries, because of the small size and because of the fact that everybody serves in the armed forces. It's for a few years. So anybody who's an innovator who's done a stint in the armed forces obviously has a better understanding uh,
Right.
after that 2 years tenure about what exactly are the requirements.
Right.
From that perspective, if you see, they have certain advantages, and yes, they have taken advantage of whatever advantages they have. In our case, as you mentioned, due to whatever historical reasons, largely the defense procurement and defense innovation was in the public sector domain.
Right.
Whether you talk about the DRDO or you talk about the DPSUs. So this shift over to the private sector has happened very recently. I would say just in about the last 20 years or so. Within the private sector, again, it is normally the small startups who are more agile and who are more innovative, which come out with the cutting edge products.
Right.
So the shift to the small startups and recognizing that a small startup with a big idea can deliver is
Right.
something which is much more recent. I would say just about 2018, 19, somewhere about there. That IDEX, I think, has been a big game changer. And again, for IDEX, let's acknowledge that even after IDEX was launched in the first 2 years, 3 years, they did not really have the impact which they could have or they should have till the time the in 2022, if I'm not wrong, April 2022, when the amendments were made to the DAP to facilitate procurement on fast track for IDEX procedures.
Right.
So, as I said, finally, the bottom line is the bottom line. If the startups and the defense startups are profitable, then the funding will follow, the R&D will follow. So everything comes down to that. Can I make one more thing
Yeah.
about here
Please.
about the this is moving away from your specific question, but to a larger
Yeah.
uh, picture. Now, in Ops Sindoor, what I see happening now is, with the performance, the demonstrated performance, I would say, of our indigenous systems,
Oh,
more and more. So, two, three things will happen. First, I see that the defense budget would go up, even if not substantially, even if marginally, but the defense budget would need to go up. Uh,
right.
till now, especially if you see the younger generation, war was something distant, something which war or military conflict or skirmish or whatever you want to call it that. It was something which happened in other countries, which happened in Ukraine, which happened in Gaza, which happened. It is not something which happened in India or it did not concern you, especially if you talk about the post millennial generation, even
Right.
Kargil they have not seen. So this
Yeah.
is the first time where people actually realize that it is, why defense is important. So the defense budget will go up. When the defense budget goes up, major chunk of it, if not all of it, would be from indigenous sources. So that,
Right.
of course, is good for the defense industry. At the same time, I see our defense exports I had mentioned earlier have gone up substantially in the recent past. I see them going up manyfold in the very near future, because when our systems have proven themselves, I think it's not only us but even the rest of the world which has taken note of it. So the demand for Indian products will go up. So I see the domestic demand as well as the demand for exports both increasing substantially, which I think should be good news for the defense sector.
Right. Before I move on to the next question, I thought of explaining a small thing to the listeners. Indigenous defense ecosystem is not necessarily restricted to weapons and the entire weapon system or entire equipment. It includes a small components that those are being made in other countries earlier and now being made in India. So I believe the IDEX is the one which is, as you said, has enabled a lot of opportunity for smaller firms and startups.
Not only IDEX, sir, IDEX, TDF, even the other changes in
Yeah.
procedures which we've been discussing, the emergency procurement which we discussed, that also quite a substantial part of it is from the Indian firms. So IDEX, yes, has been the most visible and the most successful of, and specifically in IDEX, the IDEX Print
Yeah.
has been the most visible and the most successful. But I think it's everybody and every procedure and every change which has, as you said, it doesn't happen in one day. So everybody has come together and changes are happening, and the rate of change is only getting faster.
Yeah, great. Because we have seen its output in Operation Sindoor, and since you mentioned about DRDO and other institutions, we have seen the role of those institutions as well as the other contributors from private
Absolutely,
sector.
absolutely.
So, what role do startup and private sector firms play in complementing the work of DRDO and other public defense institutions? Because we have to go hand in hand to make it, and as a comprehensive system. What role do startups and private sector firms play?
So we keep talking about, this is a overused term about a whole of government approach. But it's
Yeah,
not only the whole of government approach; it's a whole of nation approach.
yeah,
When a nation goes to war, it is not only the armed forces which go to war; it is the whole nation and the entire strength, which includes the industrial ecosystem which goes to war. Right. So here I would like to make 2 points. You asked what is the role of small startups. So one is, of course, which again you yourself brought out, that it's not only the complete systems, it is also manufacturers at various tiers, the tier 2, tier 3 suppliers who are there who are making small components.
yeah,
So even if you talk about the systems which are being made, for example, by DPSUs, or DRDO has developed something and then transfer the technology either to the private sector or to the DPSUs. So in that, when it is being finally made, there would be hundreds of other firms who will be indirectly involved. The ancillary industry, if I can call it that, which comes together, which makes components. So that's the first part. So it's um, everybody. The second point which I want to make, and this is something again which I've spoken about earlier, is so let's talk about drones. Now, if you've seen the swarms which came, swarming might not be the correct term technically, in the sense that they were. When I say swarm, I'm not talking about swarming technology. I'm talking about numbers. The
right,
huge
right.
number of drones which were deployed by Pakistan on the day one and day two. Now. And I keep saying this: if you think that when the war starts, and this was not a full scale war, but when the war starts, the number of drones which you would require would be hundreds of thousands. We've seen it in Ukraine, especially. So if the war gets to be a long drawn out conflict, then the industrial base and what is called the surge manufacturing capability, that comes into play. So that means, because it doesn't make sense, obviously, to stockpile hundreds of thousands of drones. You, of course, have to stockpile to meet the immediate thing in case there's a war. But after that, if the war drags on, then you should have the capability to just ramp up your manufacture. As I said, what is called surge manufacturing. Now, to
Correct.
have this capability to have surge manufacturing, there are two things which are needed. One could be if you have something which is dual use. So that gives you a capability. So let's take an example in drones. So there are firms who are making agricultural drones which are being used,
Right.
for the civil purposes, and which are drones are required for a number of civil uses, not only in agriculture, but for mapping and various other things, you are
Surveying and
well aware.
everything. Yeah.
So now the same the capability to manufacture at scale, if it exists for civil uses, repurposing them for war is easier. So one
Mm.
is, of course, having dual use technology. That is important. The second way, you can have a surge manufacturing capability, or capability which is much more than what your
The
the immediate
requirements
needs of your armed forces are, would be through exports.
are. Right.
So, as I mentioned, I see a huge demand for our exports in the very near term, in the short term. Now, if that happens, that helps us by developing our surge manufacturing capability, and that also helps the whole ecosystem come up.
Right, right. There's a question which I've been thinking for a while to post it to you. Whenever there's a war, right, and after that we always figure out the challenges that we faced, and that will eventually lead to new procurement. As you said, Pakistan is going for next generation fighter jet from China. So India also procured a lot of things in the past, and the pressure always come from international suppliers. They trying to push their own, systems towards the country, which may require for further, strengthening their capabilities. Now, is it something where India will move forward and think ahead rather getting into that trap, looking at their own opportunities wherever it is required? India should go for it, but at places where there are innovative, cheap, uh, the tactics, or I could say the newer way of looking at war, a newer way of utilizing things like drone and new things can be deployed, right? So how do you see this? Like, where are we going to, move on, in coming years, especially on this, let's say 15 years from now? What is the scope for Indian defense innovation system? Is it going to continue depend on the foreign systems to further refine, or we are going to make a new, way for the future? It's a pretty long question. You can take your time to answer it in
So
multiple
let
parts.
me let me give you a pretty long answer, sir, and I'll break up the answer into two, three parts.
Right,
Now, first thing, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. Between innovation and indigenization, what is important? I would say both are important.
right,
The second thing which I feel is, you mentioned about, there would be pressure on India. I don't think India would do what's the best in our national interest. Having said that, I do not think that it is a bad. Whatever amount of funding you provide for R&D would never be enough,
right,
right? And the budget would always be limited. So if you take that reality, it's a question of deciding where exactly to invest. Where do you get the maximum bang for the buck? So our advantage, when I said that, the emerging technology, or the systems which are just coming in, which will define the future of warfare, is where the maximum or the lion's share of our R&D resources should be going. When I say resources, I'm talking not only about funds, which is of course a resource, but also, the people, the entire gamut of things which are required for R&D. But uh, it is not that the legacy systems will also continue, which have to be maintained, which have to be kept operational. In addition, the things, it's not that warfare will change overnight. The next war would be only with the unmanned systems and man-unmanned teaming and things of that kind. The guns will also continue playing their role, and as would various other things. So I would feel that if we get a opportunity to collaborate with another country, it and if it creates a win-win, we should seriously consider it. As I mentioned, some of the systems which have been used now and which have given a good account of themselves have been actually collaborative projects, whether with Russia or with Israel. So there
yeah.
is no harm if you can collaborate with a friendly country and you know uh,
Transfer the technology. Yeah,
create a win-win, where we jointly develop the technology and we jointly manufacture it, or we manufacture it mostly in India. I think that's a big plus. About pure imports, because it would, we've talked about two things till now. One is our own R&D. Second, we've talked about a collaborative approach. However, there would be some systems which are presently not available in India, and which, due to whatever reasons, the collaboration in R&D doesn't work out because those systems are already well established or already developed. You can't get into collaborative. You can get into collaborative R&D for the future, but a system which already exists, and there may be a need to buy out that system. So I think in that case, what I expect to happen, and I think increasingly that will happen, is that the decision on which system to go for would also be based on how much of manufacturing they're willing to shift to India.
Yeah.
So it could be a system which is imported. However, given the size of a market and given the fact that manufacturing in India itself has advantages, I do think we can prevail upon the countries whom we are importing from to shift not only manufacturing but also what is called the MRO, or that specifically in the case of the aircraft, but in any system, the repair, the overhaul, the maintenance, that can be set up in India. So there is scope for collaboration even in the systems where we are going in for procurement and
Right.
not collaborative R&D. That's what I feel.
Yeah, perfect. So before we end today's show, I think we have hours to talk, but then due to the paucity of time, don't want to end here. Just a simple question. Maybe you can answer. Try to answer that. Is like, what is the right amount of R&D? Like, let me tell you why I'm asking this question. Whether it is for scientific research or for defense-related, R&D purposes, we always come to this term like the R&D budget has to be increased. So how should, I'm not asking like how much percentage we should increase or how should we do, but how do you define the requirement of budget for a particular R&D, how it is done, particularly from your research skills that
So the debate which has been going on for a long time is the what you call the guns versus butter debate.
Yeah.
Is how much should you spend in development and how much you spend in defense. And that itself is a question which is a very difficult question to answer. But if you're talking not only about guns and butter, but you're also talking about whether the guns and the butter should be made through innovation, which is indigenous, which means funding R&D. As I mentioned, the budget would never be sufficient. They are always
right.
Opposing demands on the budget. There has to be the welfare has to be looked after, the development has to be done, the infrastructure has to come up. So one is I mentioned infrastructure. If the road infrastructure, any infrastructure, the airports increase in numbers as well as in capacity, that does have an indirect effect, if not a direct effect, on the industrial ecosystem, which again has an indirect effect on the R&D. So I think everything is one linked. Second is the question which you asked about how much should we invest in R&D. I think there are enough examples. I think innovation does not cost money. Innovation makes money. If you spend substantially in R&D, the products which will come out of that, and this you can see in whichever field, even in the private sector, some of the firms which are doing very well, or the global leaders, their strength has been their R&D or their innovation.
Right.
Now, increasingly, the government role in R&D would be important because there's certain things which require a huge amount of funding, and there's something which nobody else can or will invest in unless the government supports it. So that is one. But I would like to see increasingly the private sector also investing in R&D. And as I mentioned, that would happen only if they have, I wouldn't say assurance of orders, but at least a reasonable confidence that if they come up with a good product, it would be inducted, and it will be inducted in a double quick time and not get stretched over time. So that is something which I think we need to target. Once you do that, so again, if I have to sum up in one sentence, target procurement, R&D will follow, the venture capitalists will follow, the funding will follow. If procurement can be targeted, that is the problem which I think which you need to fix.
Perfect. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts on this interesting topic. I'm sure the listeners would love to hear you again, and we'll look forward to have you on other podcast session. And thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much, sir. It's always a pleasure interacting with you and discussing various topics with you. And you always come up with a different topic every time. So that's starting from across the board, you always come up with different topics. So it's always a pleasure talking to you. And yes, I do hope the listeners enjoy the conversation as much as we had having it.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.